It was a full moon night. The restaurant was empty. No customers, no noise, just the constant sound of the ocean waves crashing against the rocks and the oil boiling. Silver light slipped through the greasy windows, drawing crooked shadows across the kitchen floor. Every crackle from the fryer sounded too loud, as if something were trying to crawl out of the oil. The clock on the wall read 11:57, and the second hand seemed slower than normal. The air felt heavy, dense, hard to breathe. Outside, the wind whistled around the corners of the old building. Inside, the smell of burnt grease felt stronger, almost metallic. That's when the lights flickered for the first time. A single flicker, quick, sharp. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The phone on the counter began vibrating before it even rang. When it finally did, the sound echoed like a scream inside the empty dining room. On the other end, there was no voice, only slow, dragging breathing. Something scraped against the back door, like metal scratching metal. The waves kept crashing against the rocks, but now they seemed to follow a different rhythm. And then, right in front of the restaurant, the headlights of an old bus lit up in the darkness. It was Tuesday. Bob had always hated working the night shift at the old Krusty Krab. But that night, something felt different. Squidward was bored. "Want to hear a story?" he asked with that crooked smile. Bob hesitated, but the silence was worse, so Squidward began. He spoke about a former employee who never appeared in team photos, even though he had worked there for months. He said the man avoided mirrors because he swore his reflection took a few seconds longer to imitate him. He told how one night the sound of a spatula kept echoing in the kitchen, even after the man had already left. Bob tried to laugh, but the laugh died before it could fully come out. The fryer bubbled louder, as if reacting to the name Squidward whispered next. He hated the night shift, said something watched from the dark storage room. The air seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if the restaurant were shrinking around them. The clock on the wall made a dry click and stopped. Squidward tilted his head, listening to something Bob hadn't noticed yet, a rhythmic, metallic sound coming from the empty kitchen. Bob swallowed hard when he realized the noise followed the same rhythm as his own heartbeat, and for one deeply uncomfortable moment, he felt like they weren't alone inside. No one knew where that man had come from, and one night like this, he was preparing patties when the blade slipped. The scream echoed through the kitchen. He had cut off his own hand. But unlike you, he wasn't a sponge. The hand didn't grow back. In its place, he attached an old spatula, rusted, stained with burnt oil. And they say after the accident, he began talking to himself during his shifts. He claimed he could hear the oil whispering his name, that the fryer called to him when the restaurant was empty. Some swear they saw the spatula move even when his arm was still. The metallic sound echoed across the floor like dragging footsteps. He stopped blinking often. His eyes stayed open far too long. And whenever someone asked if he was okay, he would answer with a smile twisted beyond anything human. One early morning, they found marks on the kitchen wall, deep scratches as if something had been sharpened there repeatedly. The smell of burnt oil never left the spot where he used to stand. Even after cleaning, the odor remained, stronger whenever the lights flickered. On his last night, no one saw him leave through the front door, but everyone heard the slow dragging of the spatula down the dark hallway. The clock struck exactly midnight when the sound stopped. And ever since then, every Tuesday at the same hour, the noise echoes again in the empty kitchen. One day, the old man decided to quit, and while walking home, he crossed the street distracted.
The bus didn't break. The body was taken away, but at his funeral, he was fired. We can't keep dead employees. And that's when the legend began. The following week, the night shift was strangely quiet. Too quiet. Customers said they saw someone standing across the street after closing, a motionless silhouette under the flickering streetlight. The bus driver swore that every Tuesday he felt extra weight when stopping in front of the restaurant, as if someone boarded even though the doors never opened. Inside the kitchen, the fryer turned on by itself at 11:57. The oil began bubbling without anyone touching it, and the smell, that metallic smell, returned to the air. Some employees claimed the phone rang exactly 3 times and stopped. When they answered, only breathing, slow, too close. There was also the unmistakable sound of metal scraping across the floor, dragging, rhythmic, patient. And whenever someone gathered the courage to look toward the dark storage room, they swore they saw something reflected in the stainless steel counters that wasn't really there. Squidward took a deep breath. He comes back every Tuesday night. Bob started trembling, and there are always 3 signs. At that exact moment, the lights flickered. Bob froze. "That was coincidence," Squidward said too quickly. Then the phone rang. Bob answered. Silence. Breathing. Then nothing. And then the sound. Brakes screeching outside. A bus stopping right in front of the restaurant. The headlights cut through the windows and split the dining room into 2 pale halves. Their shadows stretched long and distorted across the floor. The engine kept running for far too long. No doors opened, no passengers stepped out, but the smell of burnt oil grew stronger, suffocating. A metallic snap echoed from the dark hallway. Bob felt something warm touch his shoulder, but when he turned, no one was there. The lights flickered again, faster now, like a warning. Squidward tried to laugh, but the sound came out dry and broken. The phone began vibrating on the counter again. This time, it didn't even ring. Outside, a silhouette began forming in front of the headlights. Tall, motionless, something reflecting where a hand should be. And the sound of metal dragging across asphalt passed through the closed door as if it were right behind them. Footsteps, slow, dragging, something striking metal like a spatula scraping the floor. Bob was crying now. Squidward was sweating cold. "I made it up. I made it all up," he whispered. The door opened. A tall figure, dark, sunken eyes, and a spatula gleaming under the failing light. Absolute silence. The figure spoke. "I'm here for the job interview." The voice was too low, almost emotionless. It didn't match the unmoving face under the trembling light. Bob felt his legs give out as cold night air invaded the room. The figure stepped inside, and the metallic sound echoed louder on the floor. The spatula reflected the full moon for a second, as if wet. Squidward tried to speak, but his throat felt locked. The man slowly tilted his head, scanning every corner of the restaurant. His eyes didn't blink. The smell of burnt oil became unbearable. The clock on the wall started ticking again, striking midnight. The bus engine outside remained on, as if waiting. Bob noticed a dark trail behind the figure. It didn't look like water. The light flickered once more, and for a moment the figure seemed much closer than it should have been. When the light stabilized, neither of them could remember if he had actually moved. But the most terrifying part wasn't that. It wasn't the man. It wasn't the bus. It was what happened next. The lights flickered again, on their own, without anyone touching the switch. And for a second, there was someone behind them, smiling, thin, pale, with sharp teeth. When they turned, he was gone. The air grew heavy, as if something invisible filled the entire room. Bob felt a chill crawl slowly up his spine, like cold fingers sliding beneath his skin. Squidward couldn't move, his eyes locked on the distorted reflection in the window, because for a moment there were 3 silhouettes in the glass, and none of them blinked. The fryer suddenly roared to life, oil splattering violently as if something were thrashing inside. The phone fell off the hook and swung back and forth, emitting a continuous hiss. Outside, the bus engine finally shut off. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, suffocating. Then the sound began again, not from the door, not from the street, but from inside the dark storage room. A slow dragging, metallic, rhythmic, and this time it was coming toward them. He was tall, thin, dressed in a long black coat dragging across the greasy floor, and where one hand should have been, there was a rusted spatula glinting under the unstable light. Suddenly, he began hurling scorching hot fries, still dripping boiling oil, at them, as if each piece were thrown with the precise intention of burning skin and memory alike. The fries struck the counter, scattering sizzling drops into the air, the smell of burning grease mixing with panic, their screams echoing through the empty dining room as they ran without looking back, slipping on the floor, stumbling over their own shadows, hearing behind them the metallic rhythm of the spatula hitting the ground, closer and closer, like an iron heart beating in the dark. The door burst open violently, the cold night wind cutting across their faces, and even outside they could still hear the slow dragging from within, as if the restaurant itself were breathing. They say the bus eventually drove away empty, but the smell of burnt oil never left. And every Tuesday when the moon is full, the lights flicker, the phone rings, and something tall and thin stands motionless in the dark kitchen of the old restaurant, waiting. And sometimes, if you look closely at the employee schedule posted by the door, you might notice a name written there in grease, a name that wasn't there before, a name that no one remembers writing, and if you blink, it's gone.